So I don't want to make a sweeping generalisation about the people who watch this video, but your age range could be anything from 12 or 15 years old right through to 70, 75, depending upon your interests and whether you think this is something you want to watch. But what I want to talk about today is mobile phones, smartphones and phones for the older generation or senior citizens. Now, like I say, I don't know your age, but here in the UK it's generally said that a senior citizen is someone who's over the age of 60 to 65, and many of us would envisage a senior citizen as someone who's much older, more experienced in life, going grey, losing their sight, losing their hearing, and that is a bit of a stereotype, and we all know or can relate to people like that, because inevitably in life that's going to happen to all of us at some point. You know, as we get older we're going to lose our sight or lose our hearing, but we're also changing the way in which we live, and people are living for longer, they're living different lifestyles. So where we had harder lives before, we're now having different lifestyles that allow us to have better health by the time we're that age, and subsequently the way we integrate with the world and our knowledge of communications is different. And I'd argue that a lot of the people watching this could be in that age bracket but don't like to call themselves a senior citizen. That whole ethos of being over 60 or 65, you know, you kind of feel that you're old, but you're not, and you're well affair with modern technologies. You've got your big plasma screen, you've got your stereo, you've got your state-of-the-art technology. So why do you necessarily need or want a phone that's engineered to someone who's that age? Now, a lot of manufacturers are starting to come up with these phones, and Doro is the best example of this, of designing phones that are oriented to the older generation, people who are losing their sight, losing their hearing, which is good, and that definitely serves a purpose, and there are people out there who want it. But if you're a 40-something person, you might be thinking that your 70, 80-year-old mum or dad actually wants one of these phones. Now, they may be hard of hearing, but their sight might be perfectly fine, or vice versa. But people are in a better state today, and they don't necessarily want these phones that have a image of being for old people with big buttons, emergency call things. And if you've grown up with modern technology, there's a high likelihood that you want a device that is representative of that. You want the latest HTC, you want the latest BlackBerry, but you may find it more difficult because the keys are smaller, because the screen isn't as big. So why don't manufacturers start looking at little ways and things that could perhaps give the benefit of these phones that are generally designed for the older generation, but not have that tag and not look so unattractive as maybe some of these phones do? And I think possibly manufacturers are missing a bit of a trick here. People want the latest smartphones but may not choose to go for them because they can't hear them, and they just want a little bit of a louder smartphone. There are so many different aspects of the phone that can be redesigned to suit different people's needs. But from a bit of research, it seems that in the US there's a requirement by manufacturers to produce phones that have hearing aid loops and attachments into them. So why doesn't that really happen here in the UK? Because that would solve problems for people who have difficulties with hearing. So they could still use their BlackBerry because they've got perfect sight, but the audio issues are no longer the case. And if it's emergency functions that someone might need, you could have a very well and active person, but they may have, I don't know, suffered from heart attacks or strokes and be in a position whereby they may be vulnerable. But otherwise they're generally well, but they need the reassurance of an emergency solution. So why could a modern BlackBerry not have an emergency button? It need not necessarily be big, but it's a button there that does the same principle. Maybe adopting more voice commands, because we generally don't lose our voice when we're old. People can still do that, and maybe just have a button and the phone be more intelligent. about picking up on voice commands. I know there's a lot of technology that goes behind it, but are those options and ways that we can go forward? Now, from a industry point of view, there's a bit of a change where mobile phone retailers didn't ever want to stock these sort of not so pretty phones that are designed for the older person. That's starting to change, and people are realising there's a huge market because there are more over 60s in the UK than there are under 16. But I don't really like personally this ethos that's going with it, the fact that there are people that need these phones but they're targeted at the over 65s. Well, that doesn't mean that everyone over 65 should have one of these phones. They want a modern smartphone because they can use it, but there are small things that draw them to these other phones because of problems they may have. So what are your thoughts and comments on this? Are Doro and things doing the right things by producing phones with big buttons and emergency SOS things, or should manufacturers try to pick up on producing devices with enhanced features that really in the long term wouldn't cost them much and wouldn't really affect the device in the way it performs, but would give benefit to people with hearing issues, sight issues, or are vulnerable and need those emergency contacts? I'd be really interested to hear what you think, and maybe we could start quite a good discussion on what really is a bit of a touchy subject for some people. Leave your comments below and we'll catch up on this subject later.